What we're going to be going over here is cost volume profit analysis, where we're going to be looking at understanding the sales ratio here on bundled products or group products. So what we mean by our bundled products here, this is where you have multiple products that are grouped together here to determine any financial analysis, like determining the income here, costing, and so forth. And for example, we're going to be basing it on bundled products here of A and B. So we're going to be grouping these two different products together here, A and B. But you could go through the same procedure here for bundling any number of different products. Say you had A, B, C, D, and so forth here. So first thing you have to do here, when you have these bundled products, there's group products, you have to determine their sales ratio here. And we're going to be looking at, for comparison purposes here, we're going to be looking at budgeted sales versus our actual sales. So starting with our budgeted sales here. So we've got these two products, A and B here, and we plan on selling, based on our budget here, 30,000, a quantity of 30,000 here for A and 10,000 here of B. So that's a total amount here, what, a 40,000 here. Total quantity between A and B is 40,000. So to determine our sales ratio here, well, you just take B here, you divide 10,000 into A's quantity here, 30,000, and you're going to get 3 here. So you're selling 3 of product A here for every 1 of product B. I'm just showing it up above here. 30,000 divided by 10,000 gives you 3 here for product A. And 10,000 into itself gives you 1 here for product B. So 3 plus 1 is going to give you a total here of 4, a quantity of 4 here for both A and B for each bundle that we're going to be looking at. So if we sell here, let's look at it. We sell 40,000 here of total quantity of 40,000 here of A and B, divided here by 4, a quantity of 4 in each bundle. You're going to get 10,000 bundles here based on that sales ratio here of 3 to 1. Now let's go and look at our actual sales here. This is where we actually sold 36,000 here of A and 4,000 of B. So that's going to give us a sales ratio here of 9 to 1. Simply taking B's quantity here, 4,000, divided into 36,000 here of A. So that means we're selling a quantity of 9 of A here for every 1 of B that we're selling. And then B, 4,000 into itself here, that gives us the quantity of 1 of B. So total amount here in quantities for A and B, 9 plus 1 gives us 10, quantity of 10 in each bundle. So we know that we've sold a quantity of 40,000 here for A and B here. So divide 10, the quantity of 10 here, into the 40,000. That gives us 4,000 bundles here that we'll be looking at here based on that 9 to 1 sales ratio. But the only thing that's changed here is the sales mix here between A and B. The total quantity that we sold here, both for our budgeted and our actual amounts, is $40,000. 40,000. A quantity of the 40,000 here between A and B. Okay, so now let's look at this, break the sales ratio down here. So for our budgeted sales, well, we've got that here sitting at 3 to 1, 30,000 of A, 10,000 of B, 3 to 1 sales ratio. That we equated here to 10,000 bundles. And it was broken down here, and each bundle would include a quantity of 3 of A here, product A, and a quantity of 1 of B here, for product B. Total quantity is 4 here per bundle. Okay, so we've got our budgeted sales. That ratio is fine here, 3 to 1. Okay, now let's move down to what we have here for our actual sales. Now this is where we're going to make a conversion here. We're going to take this 9 to 1 ratio that we'll be looking at, and we want to convert it over to a ratio that's compatible with, for comparison purposes, to our budgeted sales here of 3 to 1. Okay, so and we're going to do that for a specific reason here when we start looking at our comparison on our cost volume profit graph. So how would we do that? Our 9 to 1 sales ratio here, based on our actual sales, we determined that we'd have 4,000 bundles based on that 9 to 1 sales ratio. A quantity of 9 here of A, plus 1 here of B. Total of that would be a quantity of 10, divided it into the total 40,000 here quantities that we sold for A and B, gives us that 4,000 here as bundles, number of bundles. Now we want to convert that into 10,000 bundles here, because we want to make the comparison here, look at our budgeted sales versus our actual sales based on the same number of bundles that we'd be looking at. So the conversion here would be simple. You just take, well, of A, we know that we've sold 36,000 of A, total sales of 40,000 here. So that is going to give us, the ratio here is going to give us 90%. So A represents 90% of our total quantity in our sales here. And then we know that we're looking here to have four, we want to have four, a quantity of 4 here for A and B for both our budgeted sales and our actual sales here. So just take 4 times the 90%. That's going to give you 3.6 here. So to get this total quantity of 4 here, we're going to have to sell, or actual sales would have been 3.6 here of A. So that was how you determine your ratio here for A. And then for B, you could just look at it, 4,000 here, the total of 4,000 here for B divided by the total sales of 40,000. That's going to represent 10%. So B has 10% of those total sales here of 40,000 times our total that we're looking at here, total quantity of 4 units per bundle. So 4 times that gives you 0.40 here. So our total amounts, converting this 9-to-1 ratio over here to something that's comparable to our 3-to-1. So this is what we're going to have here. A is going to represent 3.6, and B here, product A, we're going to have to sell 3.6 of A here for every 0.4 here of B. So this is going to come in handy to us, converting our 9-to-1 sales ratio over, and that represents 3.6 to 4.0 based on the arithmetic we did here. So now we've converted here those 4,000 bundles here based on the 9-to-1 sales ratio into 10,000 bundles here, coming up with our new ratio here, 3.6 to 0.40 here. So total quantity here based on our new sales ratio, that based on our conversion, is a quantity of 4 here of A and B for each bundle. And that we can make our comparison here to our budgeted sales, where we have 3-to-1 here. So we have a total quantity here for each bundle at 4,000. So here we can work with the same number of bundles here, both for our budgeted sales and our actual sales, 10,000. And just going down here and looking at it, that 9-to-1 sales ratio equals our 3.6 to 0.40 sales ratio. Now we can make our comparison here to 3-to-1 ratio to the 9-to-1 by going to the 3.6 to 0.40, and that's where we can compare those 10,000 bundles that we looked at. So this is where we're going to be going through a cost volume profit graph here, and we're going to be looking at some scalar quantity here that relates that 9-to-1 sales ratio to the 3.6 to 0.40 sales ratio. So for 9.1, we're going to have sold at 4,000 here bundles versus our ratio here on both budgeted and actual. We'll have 10,000 bundles that we have sold. Okay, so now let's go look at we'll do our analysis here on our cost volume profit graph. I got a lot of numbers laying out here, but just get the understanding of what's going on. Across our x-axis here, I'm just going to show the bundles sold in thousands here, and our y-axis, those are our dollar amounts here. Okay, so what we're attempting to do here on our bundles sold, we're going to be looking at the point here of 4,000 here bundles versus 10,000 bundles. But when we're dealing with this cost volume profit analysis, this is where we have to set up for our graphing here. We have to set up our revenues, per unit revenues that are being generated for each bundle sold, and also our costing for each bundle sold. And the difference between our revenue and costing is going to give us our contribution margin. But you can see here, the reason, looking at our 4,000 here bundles based on our 9-to-1 ratio, you see you have much steeper revenues and cost lines here than you would have for looking at our revenue and cost lines here based on our 10,000 bundles sold. And the reason I made the conversion here from the 9-to-1 sales ratio here to that 3.6 to 0.40 sales ratio. This is where I can make a good comparison here versus our budgeted amount of 3-to-1 sales ratio versus our actual here of 3.6 to 0.40 by making the conversion. So we can look at our compare our budgeted versus our actual based on the 10,000 bundles. So and there's a multiplicative factor that we're going to be going through here to relate those the per unit revenues and per unit costs. And when I talk about units, those are the bundles that we're selling. There's a multiplicative factor. It's actually going to be a 2.5 factor of 2.5 here between your different revenues and your costing. So let's go and let's look at that factor here. So this is how you would determine the relationship here. Knowing one, if say for example you knew that you were selling here 10,000 bundles here at this particular revenue and costing on a per bundle basis, you could, knowing that amount, based on some ratio here, we'll be able to determine how many we'd have to be selling here based on the 9-to-1 ratio. That's all we're trying to do, is relate this 9-to-1 ratio to the ratios here, that 3-to-1 and 3.6 to 0.40. So okay, so this is our ratio here. You take your sales ratio, it's really a sales ratio scalar factor here. So what I can do here to determine the ratio here is I just taken, I knew that 9-to-1 ratio here, and we determined that to equal 3.6 to 0.40 here. So all you have to do is take your 9 here, say 9, and compare it to 3.6. So put 9 up here as a 9-to-1 ratio of 3.6 to 0.4. So just take your 3.6 here, divide it into 9, and you're going to get a scaling factor here of 2.5. So what is that really telling us? This is where we would take our quantity here, 10,000 bundles, divide it here by 2.5, and that's going to equal 4,000 bundles. So we converted here by taking the scaling factor here, 9 to 3.6. We determine that to be 2.5. We know that we have 10,000 bundles here, so divide it by the scaling factor, 2.5, you're going to couple it 4,000 bundles here. So just a comparison. So you could also been using the 1 to 1.40 here. 1 divided by 0.40 is going to give you a 2.5 scaling factor. But in either case here, you're going to come up with the ratio here of 2.5 to 1 ratio here. So if you knew that you had 4,000 bundles here based on the 9-to-1 ratio, you could determine the 10,000 simply by taking your scaling factor 2.5 times 4,000 here, and that is going to give you 2.5 times 4,000 is going to give you 10,000 bundles. Just the scaling factor here is only for understanding the relationships here when you're looking at those different sales ratio here. We're looking at the 9-to-1 versus our 3-to-1 and that 3.6 to 0.40 that we converted. Okay, so that factor here, just looking at your different ratios here, you can determine what your amount, knowing one or the other. If we knew the 4,000 here as far as our 9-to-1 ratio, we could determine what we would have to, our conversion here, based on our scaling factor here. Okay, so now let's go up, and maybe before we get into just going through our graph here and looking at our incomes and so forth, let's go up and let's understand our costing and our revenue lines here. Really go through that quick here just for basic understanding. Okay, so let's look here at bundles with sales ratio here of 9-to-1 here. And really what I'm trying to do here is just determine our revenues, or determine that revenue, per unit revenues, or per bundle revenues, per bundle costs, and also the contribution per bundle here. So looking at, this is just how we'd go through it here, and we'll go through looking at our sales ratio here of 9-to-1. So for product A, what you're going to do is just take your selling price on a per unit basis here and take it times, and then plug this your ratio in here. Product A, we have that 9 units, our quantity of 9 that we're selling here for product A. Let's just go through it this way. We'll just look at the fact here with setting up this table. You just take your selling price here times the per unit price here for product A and product B, and then you take your variable costs on a per unit basis here for product A in product B, and then the difference between your selling price on a per unit basis, variable cost on a per unit basis, gives you your contribution margin here on a per unit basis. And you can work these across either through your row additions here, or your row additions, or your column additions, either one. But it's all based on plugging in those ratios here. For product A, we have that 9, a quantity of 9. For product B, quantity of 1. So just going across here, you can do the arithmetic here. Sales price $2 times 9, quantity of 9. That's going to give you $18 here, plus $3 times a quantity of 1 here for B is going to give you $21 here. And that's revenue on a per bundle basis that you're generating. And you can do the same thing here. Just do the arithmetic for your variable cost here. 1.4 times quantity of 9 plus, that for product A, plus 1.8 here. Cost here per unit for product B, quantity of 1 is going to give you a costing, sum it together, a costing of $14.40 here on a per bundle basis. And just, you could do the same thing here just for your contribution margins here. Just your selling price, variable cost is going to give you your contribution on a per unit or per quantity basis for A here times 9 plus 1.2 here for B times quantity 1 is going to give you a $6.60 contribution margin. Simply, you could take the $21 in revenue less a $14.40 in cost here. Difference gives you $6.60. Now, do the same thing for your sales ratio here for 3.6 to 0.40. Instead of, you just plug in here, in this case for product A, it would be 3.6 quantity, product B 0.4 quantity. And you're going to get a sales revenue here on a per bundle basis of $8.40, costing $5.76. The difference here is going to be $2.64 as your contribution margin. So that ratio that we were talking about, that scaling factor, you can see it here. You just take the $21 here, and that ratio of 9 to 1 here for revenue, divided by $8.40 here on the 3.6 to 0.40 for revenue here of $8.40. So you get the scaling factor here of 2.5. And same here for your costing. You're going to come up with a scaling factor 2.5, and for contribution margin 2.5. So you can just see there's a multiplicative factor here. Now remember, the relationship here is really an inverse relationship. So with our 3.6 to 1, or 3.6 to 0.40, we were actually selling a quantity here of 10,000. That was based on 10,000 bundles. And then it has a lower cost, or lower revenue and cost per bundle here, the 10,000 here, because you're selling 10,000 versus up over here you're selling 4,000 bundles. So you get that higher revenue and costing here. So you can understand that here just by looking at the numbers and then relating it to our graph. And I'm only showing that as that scaling factor here. So if you knew whatever this factor is over here for your 3.6 to 0.40, then you can scale it up here to determine what it would be at 9 to 1. Okay, so that's just understanding the basic relationships here. Now let's go back down to our costing line. So here you can see our 9 to 1 ratio. We had that revenue here on a per bundle basis, $21. Our costing here that we calculated, $14.40. Difference gives us that contribution margin here of $6.60. And that, you can just compare that looking at your, go across on your dollar to your dollar lines, looking at these various revenue and cost lines. So that's what you're looking at here. And you can see when you're trying to understand this or trying to explain it to somebody, your reason we did this factoring, or we converted the 9 to 1 sales ratio here on revenue and cost to the 3.6 to 0.40, it might be a little easier to understand because you'd be comparing it, your budgeted versus your actual here are compared at the same bundles that are being sold here at 10,000, versus if you had to make the comparison here budgeted to actual, then you'd have that 10,000 here bundles for your budgeted amount here, and then your actual here would have been at 4,000. So it's a little more difficult to understand here. But in either case, let's make the clear understanding here. If you're selling 4,000 bundles here at a 9 to 1 ratio, or 10,000 bundles here at the 3.6 to 0.40 or 3.1 or 3.0 to 4.0, you're still selling the same quantity here of A and B of 40,000. All right, so that's pretty much our difference here when you're looking at the ratios and the steepness of your line. There's this scaling factor here that we determined based on those sales ratio here of 9 to 1 that we converted over 3.6 to 4. That was that scaling factor here of 2.5. All right, and just to prove that the relationship here, we're going to come up with the same income based on those different contribution margins here between the 9 to 1 ratio and our what we have converted here to 3.6 to 4.0. Let's just look at it. So our contribution margin here, and I have shown in blue here, was all our budgeted amounts. I didn't go through that. If we plug that, I had it up above there. Had we plugged the quantity of scaling, or that sales ratio of 3 to 1 in, we would have come up with our revenues here for our budgeted amount at a 3 to 1 sales ratio at $9 here for revenue, $6 here for a cost contribution margin here. Difference gives us $3 here. I should have went through that up above here. But nonetheless here, let's just look at our income here. Taking for our at our 10,000 quantity here of 10,000, that was the contribution margin here, $2.64 per bundle. So 10,000 times that, 264 is going to give you 26,400 here. Less our fixed cost. Remember, our fixed cost was on our costing lines here. We started out at 12,000 here with a fixed cost and then we added to it our variable cost per line here. So subtract our fixed cost from 12,000 from 26,400. Our income is $14,400. Now, if we go over to our contribution here, looking at our 9 to 1 sales ratio here, that was $6.60 per bundle. So 4,000 bundles here times the $6.60 gives us, again, $26,400, same as we had here for our 3.6, our ratios over here. And then less our fixed cost, again, here of 12,000. The difference here gives us income of $14,400. Same as we had here for our 10,000 bundles sold. So I'm just showing that it really doesn't matter what the income is going to be. Everything is related here on incomes and costs and that, but it's just looking at the 4,000 bundles here versus 10,000 bundles. That's all you're looking at. You're going to, these lines, or our costing lines here, have that multiplicative scaling factor of 2.5 between our revenues and costs here on our 9 to 1 ratio versus our ratios over here, coming up with the same income numbers in either case. So it really doesn't matter if you're whatever ratio you're working with, as long as you keep those number of bundles here relative to your costing or your revenues and your costs in each case. Okay, and then one last thing here. Maybe let's go down and look at it just to prove this a little bit further here, looking at our income here, just taking and comparing, looking at it down here, taking our 9 to 1 ratio here to determine our income versus our 3.6 to 4.0. So remember, they are equal here. 9 to 1 ratio was that D quantity here at 4,000 bundles here, and the 3.6 to 4.0 was 10,000 bundles here. So just going through that here, 4,000 here at our 9 to 1 ratio bundles times $21 here in revenue per bundle gives us 84,000. And then 4,000 times the costing here, $14.40 per bundle, 57,600. Subtract that from our cost from our revenues, less our fixed cost of 12,000 gives us income here of 14,400. And just looking at that 3.6 to 0.40 ratio here, our C here at 10,000 bundles times the revenue of $8.40 per bundle gives us 84,000, same as we had over here. So you can see they're equal here. And then our costing at $5.76 per bundle times 10,000 gives us 57,600, same as we have here. Less our fixed cost of 12,000 gives us income here of 14,400. So you can see our sales are based on our ratios here by making that conversion to from 4,000 here on a 9 to 1 ratio to the 10,000 here at 3.6 to 4.0. You're going to come up with the same incomes and so forth, just to understand that relationship. So just to sum things up here, when you're dealing with these different sales ratios here, you might have to make some conversions here to looking at, in this case we're looking at our actual versus our budgeted amount, and it might have been a little easier here if you're trying to explain it to somebody here, at least in our graph form here, by doing the conversion here, converting from our 9-to-1 sales ratio here to the 3.6 to 0.40 that we did in order to demonstrate here, at least in our graph form here, how the comparison here, in this case, is our budgeted versus our actual sales. Okay, so that'll pretty much summarize what we're talking about here when we're looking at those sales ratios, just to understand how they can be, how equal different sales ratios can be equated to be equal here, but based on those different sales ratios, you're going to come up with, in this case, different numbers of groups or products that are sold. Okay, so that'll summarize our topic.